Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Question History, where a bunch of guys ask all the questions without any of the answers. And today I'm joined once again by Hikmah History and Al Mukaddima. And today we were wondering whether we should discuss Islamic history, which is sometimes very controversial, or nationalistic history, which is almost always controversial, and decided to just do both. So, Tarek, you're going to walk us through your first choice. There's no point to this. There's no goal like there is in the debates. So tell us an interesting story where the world of Islam and nationalism blend together and create some interesting chapter.
Okay, well, naturally, this debate is going to take place in the modern period, I mean, damn, man, there's a lot of them. I guess the most commonsensical place to look is the Ottoman Empire, at least from my expertise perspective. A variety of the different constituent ethnicities within the empire obviously, start flirting with their own form of nationalism. The most interesting, I guess you can say, is probably, from in my opinion, is Arab nationalism. For a couple of reasons. A, if you think about just how integral Arabs were to Islam, I mean, it kind of came from them. B, when you think about the fact that the label of Arab is naturally quite big, you know what I mean? Like it spans 2 continents, right? And there was a lot of diversity amongst them, and so naturally there was a lot of diversity in the kind of in the forms of nationalism that came about. In some places there was a fairly homogenous outlook in terms of. By the way, we don't have a time limit on this, do we?
No, not at all.
Okay, so in some places in the world, I know that there was a fairly homogenous, relatively homogenous outlook on nationalism, whereas in the Arab world, that's not the case. I mean, you have particularistic nationalism where Lebanese, Iraqi, Egyptian. Then you have Arab nationalism, Pan-Arabism as they called it, where they're all one. And whilst some people within those in those trends saw an antagonism between those 2 things, there was plenty of people that saw the opportunity to have both of them at the same time. I, Tarek, can be proud of being Iraqi and part of some wider Arab group at the same time. And then when you contextualize it historically, within the latter end of the Ottoman period, in the decline of the Ottoman period, World War I, and how they are on a political level starting to play with the idea of forming their own states, and then on the intellectual level, when it kind of branches into modernism, Muslim modernism. Modernism is the best way of putting it. Forget Muslim modernism, of how this new Arab identity, Arab national identity, merges with debates surrounding modernity. That becomes very interesting as well. And then later on, when it starts merging into Siawish's bread and butter, like left-wing ideas of like socialism, partly communism in certain areas as well, and you get things like Baathism, and you get people like Nasser coming about. This, and funnily enough, this is literally what my one of my series that I'm doing right now on. I've just done the first video when Napoleon came to Egypt. It's slightly unfair, I guess you can say, because the time period is really stretched. We're literally looking at about 150 years from around the early 1800s to the 1960s, 1970s. But when you just track the genealogy of, okay, so there's kind of like a beginning stage, I guess you can call Napoleon's invasion of Egypt that, but then the different avenues that it goes into, and then sometimes it comes back, and then it forms like a sub branch over here, and then it has a real political implications, economic implications, military implications. It's just so damn interesting. I mean, I came very close to doing my master's thesis on the Al-Nahda, the Arab awakening, Arab Renaissance in the 19th century. which ties into this whole Arab nationalism and everything. I didn't do
You're
it in the end.
okay. Sorry to interrupt, but you're being very broad, and
Yeah,
some people may not know. So I
yeah,
want to ask you a specific question that
it's
may
nice,
sound
nice.
really
Thank
dumb.
you. No, no, it's
Maybe
good.
sound dumb.
Okay,
So, what's the difference between Moroccan, Algerian, Tunisian? Let's pick those, and Libyan. Let's add those. Like,
okay.
why is that line there? Is it cultural? Is it political? Is it geographical? Because
Okay. It's all of those things, dude. It's all of
okay.
those things. And very importantly, it's historical as well. If you got to remember, right? Nationalism is just an expression of some sort of a cohesive um, ideological outlook, right?
Mhm.
And that is going to be born out of a certain experience that a group has. And so, if your historical experience is different, naturally, your everything is going to be different. Your identity, your outlook, and all of those things. You can make a pretty good point that those countries you mentioned, I guess, extending into Western Libya, is if not largely dominated, the Berber ethnic group has had a very, very big impact on that region.
All
However,
right.
you also have to, if you delve into it a little bit more, there is
Mhm.
differences amongst Berbers. Like they have a confederacy, they have numerous confederacies, the Sanhaja, the Zanata, there's one other big one I forgot, but so they have those confederacies, and the people that they interact with, the people they get invaded by and that they have to resist, these things are all going to be very different. Algeria and Tunisia had to contend with Ottoman presence,
Yeah.
or yeah, just Ottoman presence. Morocco, very limited. In the 1570s and 60s and 50s, there was some, but very limited. And so that's going to have an impact. Um,
Mm.
Morocco has far more interaction with Al-Andalus than, say, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya. So that's going to have another impact.
All right.
Um, but yeah, it's just historical experience more so than anything.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take one example where the two coalesce and happen together, and Sawish can maybe pick apart whatever he wants of the two versions. Because I do believe in history, both outlooks are very important. You got to see the big picture, you got to see the big movements, big stretches of time, but you also need a smaller scale picture. Both are incredibly important. So to keep it small, I'm a Bulgarian who visited a place called Koprivchica, where it was the place of the rebellion against the Ottoman Empire, and in the late 19th century. And I had a profound experience. I read about this period for a long time, but when I got there and I saw everything, I was so interested. So I read a lot about it. Turns out that this was a place in the mountains which was sort of detached from the rest of the Ottoman Empire and had the ability to prosper under Ottoman law. And it was the home of these merchant class rich people who got rich mostly, weirdly enough, by trade, dairy trade with Egypt. And this place doesn't have a port, nowhere close to it. But somehow, I don't know exactly how they traded dairy with Egypt, and they got extremely rich and built these very fancy looking houses. So the rise of nationalism in Bulgaria, weirdly enough, starts from a place of profound liberty. These people had the freedom of movement, the freedom to trade, the freedom to own these houses. They had a beautiful church. They had all of these luxuries to them that the rest of the Bulgarian population, and I would say even Islamic citizens in Anatolia, didn't have access to. And yet they were the ones to start all of these ideas. They even had a school where you wrote things instead of a board, you had sand. So you write stuff and learn math and other things in writing in sand. And this was all happening under the presence of the Ottoman Empire. And these people traveled to places like Russia and France and got all these revolutionary ideas and brought them back and created the state. So it's always so messy because today, Bulgaria, we call that period Ottoman slavery, which is a term I really don't like because it disrespects actual slavery and actual experiences people had to go through. And I ask myself, what an interesting situation this is, that these rich people who read and wrote and were well educated and could do all these things, they were the one that created the spark. So were the Ottomans, if you wanted to build a state and protect against major rebellions, they allow this place to prosper as well as some others? Should they have been more totalitarian? Would that even make a difference? Would that just make it worse? I don't know. But the other
Mm,
thing that makes me think is that you two things can be true at the same time. There was incredible level of movement in the Ottoman Empire. As you
yeah.
can see on maps, you can see large clusters of Greek population in Istanbul and in like Varna. And at the same time, how come are these countries on the Balkans who gained independence at the exact same place, more or less, as they were when the Ottomans found them 500 years ago?
Mm.
You have all this freedom of movement. You could have gone anywhere. Why is there no minor Bulgarian state in, say, Bosnia? Why are the Bulgarians exactly the same place? Were they moved from one place to another after the independence? Maybe we see a lot of that with Greece and Turkey. But anytime you mix nationalism with other stuff, it gets weird. But I think there's an extra layer of weirdness when you're talking about it in the Islamic world. Sawish?
Um, in terms of I don't actually like, yeah, okay, you were talking about this rich community, prosperous community, having
Yeah.
all these ideas about nationalism. That's generally how it goes. The peasant class is usually too busy just trying to survive to think up
Yeah.
of ideas of liberty and stuff. But in the Ottoman Empire, I don't really understand the point that you're getting at. Um, like how you talked about being moved. I don't really understand that. Maybe Tariq can chime in.
Hmm.
Specifically about what exactly? I don't get it.
What's moving about that idea?
No, I think. Wait, see, I wish you were talking about like the physical movement of people, right?
Yeah, yeah, Georgie said something
People not
uh
moving.
about Bulgarians being where they were found by the Ottomans 500 years ago. They were not
Yeah,
moved.
Georgie, I wanted to ask you, did you mean that like in the sense that they are physically in the same place they were
Yeah, more
before,
or
or did you mean
less.
that metaphorically about like
No,
the
no, no, no,
economy?
no.
Okay.
Like geographically, like I find it weird that with all of this movement in 500 years, that Bulgaria still ends up being where it is.
Well, dude, think about it. I mean, like if like the whole tenet of the essential tenet that nationalism is built upon is that you have to have some sort of a
Roots.
exactly an emotional connection to the
Mm-hmm.
roots of a physical land. You see
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So I mean, the only way that I could see that you could extend that is if you have some sort of like irredentist claims on other territories that your neighbors have, which you feel as if it should be yours.
Because there's a part of the population which is yours there,
Yeah, yeah, they share
which
linguistic,
happened a
which
lot.
that definitely happens, of course. But yeah, you're not really supposed to move. You're so kind of supposed to stay where you are.
So is that a part of the human condition? Are we always like, have humans been this bound to where they are? Not really,
No,
because colonialism
no,
exists.
absolutely not. See this, and I really like I really like the fact that you brought this up because
Yeah.
this brings up a very interesting debate in the sense that naturally, I do not think humans, through the passage of time up until very recently, have been as stagnant and rigid in terms of their
Mm.
connection with the land. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not trying to say that you don't necessarily have a connection to the place that you're from, because I mean I was in Afghanistan just for like 7-8 years. When I visit it again, I get emotional just looking
Mm.
at the mountains, and I've been to mountains in other places. I don't get
Really?
that same
Yeah.
sort of emotion. So that
Huh.
is real, but the degree to which modernity has imposed this on us is very new. And I'm kind of split on this. I want to know what you boys think about this because on the
Are
one
you
hand,
saying that modernity is telling us to move, or is modernity
oh,
telling us to stay?
Stay.
hey, to stay definitely to stay.
Modernity.
Of
Okay.
course, man. I mean, because it's just forcing people through the lens of nationalism, I guess, to just be more. mm, It's
But
not more. Go on,
also
sorry.
I'd say, first of all, I would say that if I went to Afghanistan, I would be sad too. So I understand your emotions. But also, I think in the modern era, for example, the nation state model and all that, we don't move around as much. Like for example, after the Arab conquests, the Arabs moved into the Middle East. How many times have the Turks moved into some region?
Yeah.
So in the past, the nationalism didn't really, exist like today. It does today. And in terms of Bulgaria, I think that yeah, that these people are you saying that maybe the people who were rich and prosperous, maybe they should have moved to some other
No, 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 no,
region?
not
Is
at
that
all,
what
not
you
at all. That's not the point. That's not the point. But back to the movement of people. Like I'm a little torn on this because on one hand, yeah, you guys are right, but on the other hand, capitalism moves people quite a lot.
No, that's true.
Immigration is a big thing, and
I was
people
gonna say this.
here
Yeah.
and other places are willing to abandon everything they have, even though they love it, and
Mm.
move to another country for better opportunities for their families.
I hear that, but
If
I
anything,
was
modernity is making us more detached to our family values, and it's imposing more ideas on the self and individualism.
That's
I
true.
would say again that's a very like I don't want to say like Western centric, but I would say that that's like that's a perspective of a developed economy, because of course that drive within humans persists to this day. That has been there since time immemorial, where
Mm-hmm.
for your practical needs you
Yeah.
you have to go somewhere else. But if you just the general impression I've gotten from reading medieval, early modern texts and whatnot, the movement of people and being able to acclimatize to their new environments
Yeah.
were seemed like a much smoother process than it is now. I mean, yes, you're absolutely right, and I was going to bring this up before. You do see movement of people for economic reasons, like America, like me in Britain, see, I wish in
Or
Germany,
war, Ukraine,
or a war. Yeah,
Syria.
all of
Yep.
these things. But even when a person goes to another place, I'm not gonna say like they face discrimination, but it's just more of a thing that this is what I was, and
Yeah.
it's much harder to get. Like in the medieval period,
Yeah.
the movement of specifically Afghans between Afghanistan and India was so smooth that people could literally, quote unquote, lose their identities within the space of like 2 generations, where they could become Indians within a few generations,
Mm.
right? And it's it's very difficult to argue against the fact that nationalism and the idea of a nation state has made that a little bit more difficult, because the divisions or the parameters of my identity, because this is what it comes down to, is the parameters of the outer edges of my identity have become much more obvious,
Mm.
whereas in more historical times, um the yes, a person could have, like the center, the core of who you are, of course they would know about it. It's not like everybody was a hippie back then, but it's like on the parameters, it's like this gray area which allows a bunch of other people to come in and assimilate with you with such ease. Like it's crazy. Ethnic groups being assimilated into other ethnic groups, like that is insanity. Like not insanity in a bad way. That is so fascinating. And
It is.
I was gonna say one more thing. Oh crap! 1 second.
Okay,
This is a
I
good
would
debate.
say that the thing about the Afghans moving into India and all that, that's because borders were more fluid at the time. There was, and Afghanistan was sort of part of the Indianized civilization
Right.
at that time. Plus, a large number of Afghans already lived in India, so there was you might call it diaspora in modern terms, but
Yeah.
like that. And so today, you're saying that today moving to a new country is a bigger deal than it was in the past. In the past, you hardly ever moved alone. You moved with a unit, your tribe, your
True.
family, stuff like that. So moving was not that much of a deal because you were taking all your friends with you. Like for example, if I had all my Pakistani friends and my family here, I don't think that I would have the same difficulty that I feel now. Similarly, when Babur, for example, moved to India, he was not happy about it. Because he
Yeah.
was moving there alone with some people, not everybody that
Mm.
he wanted to move there. I think that the experience of, for example, to Germany, the experience of a Pakistani moving here or an Arab moving here is very different than the experience of a Turk moving here because there's already a large Turkic population and they have sort of figured out how to integrate themselves into um, German culture, and they don't lose completely their identity, but they
Mm.
do become to large extent German because of how many of them there are. So I think that, but then again, yes, individuality also matters today more than it did in the past. In the past, you were nothing without your unit, but today
Yeah.
you can alone make. I think that that's the main thing. I don't think that it has anything
Hmm.
to do with time.
Uh,
Or even nationalism. I think it has more to do with the people that you connect to and how many of them are in
Interesting.
the place that
that's
you
a
live.
great point, man.
It
That is a great
is
point.
because you do have Normans and many other groups which move way before nationalism was a thing, and they were creating their own communities. I don't know if you know this, but like the Venetians are very popular for like going and making a trade deal with a certain state, whether it be the Crusader states or the Byzantines. And one of the things they ask for is, I'm gonna butcher this, but they were like, give us a street, a church, a marketplace, a tavern, and a blacksmith, and
Mm.
those two, and a bath, and those are ours.
Yeah.
And they were carving out their little Venice here and there.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. No, that makes
Almost
sense.
almost all Italian city states did that. Like in
Yeah.
Crimea, they had that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even Arabs did the same in India.
Bring a little bit of home
Yeah,
to wherever you're going, which
create a community.
kind of transitions kind of well to the Crusaders going to the Levant,
Mm.
and we did get into that. And I
Yeah.
do want to unpack this because it is an interesting topic, and I keep going back and forth on it. And here's my case: why it is a clash of civilizations. Me and Tarek are never going to agree whether it's a big impact or not. I think it's a big impact. It's not the biggest impact in the world, but I think it's way bigger than you think. But in terms of the clash of civilizations, come on, man. Different tactics,
Mm.
different cultures, different religions, different different traditions, different languages, different everything.
Yeah.
How is this not a clash of civilization?
Because they go on, Siawish, sorry.
Sorry. Well, I would say that it wasn't as like to say the clash of civilizations, but how much of difference did actually exist between these civilizations? Had they not interacted with each other before? Had they not
No,
learned from each other before? Like, yeah,
no.
okay, uh, okay, you can say that the people in the Levant hadn't learned from the Franks, but there was so much that went from Levant, which was once Christian, to the Franks. So there was a lot of, like, for example, there's this book called Stealing from Saracens.
All
It's a
right.
great book. It's a great book about the architecture and how a lot of the Gothic architecture actually developed. A lot of the elements of Gothic architecture actually developed in the Middle East. And the guy who designed, I think, the St. Paul's Cathedral in London. Is it St.
Yeah.
Paul's? Yeah, the
Oh
guy
yeah,
who
he took from the Sulaimaniya Mosque, right? Christopher Wren.
yeah, he designed that, and he said that the Gothic architecture should rightly be called the Saracen architecture because of how much of the elements they took from the Saracens. So my point is that to say that it's a clash of civilizations, you would have that these are very different civilizations. They had learned from
Yes.
each other. They had interacted with each other
It's
before.
a good point until I ask you, how do you think the Franks called Cairo? Do you know? In many sources, they call it Babylon.
Hmm.
Like they had no idea where is where. They had like, you're right. It did have an impact, but did these people, that generation there, fighting in the Levant, did they know of that of such a connection? Not really.
Not knowingly,
Can
but
I
they did have a connection with each other.
can I interject a little bit?
Go
I
ahead.
would
Yeah.
say I don't think it's fair to say that it's completely not a clash of civilization because that doesn't make sense. They literally fought each other. They
Yeah.
have two different identities and they're clashing. So clearly, it is somewhat of a clash of civilization. When I say that it's not, it's my fault. I'm being sloppy and lazy with how I speak, but I'm just talking relative to how people perceive it. Like, dude, it's not even close. Like, it's not even that much
Okay.
civilization.
Let me
Because,
gamify it a bit. I'm sorry, actually.
sorry, are you gonna say something?
I'm gonna try to keep us on track by gamifying it, and I'll just do this.
Okay.
I want you to. We all know, I believe, what we mean by the term clash of civilizations, right?
Right.
Like if aliens descend and we go again and fight a war against them, that would probably be from the scale of 1 to 10 a 10 in terms of clash of civilizations,
Okay. Okay.
right?
Nice.
So if that's a 10,
Okay.
first of all, give me like, do you, let's say a very popular one, ancient Greeks versus Persians. How much of a clash of civilizations is that? And how does that compare? Is that more or less of a clash of civilizations to the Crusades?
Okay, I like this. I like this. You need to quantify things.
Yes.
I would say ancient Greek and Persia is more, man.
It's more.
Yeah.
How much
Yeah.
more?
I would agree.
Like
Where do you
much
put it
more.
on the scale?
Well, the thing is, the problem is I'm not that much of an expert, but the from the superficial knowledge I have of the ancient world, I'd put that at a solid minimum 7.
Minimum 7. All
8.
right.
I'm not mad at 9 if somebody says it.
Wow. Okay.
Because of the grandeur of the stakes. I mean, those are literally 2 of the greatest ancient civilizations. So whoever wins, it's kind of like this is important for humanity. It's not even for a region.
Okay.
The Crusades one. Okay, so it's not a 0. It's not a 1. It's not a 2.
Wait,
3.
I'm sorry. Let me clarify something. What do you
ahead.
mean by clash of civilizations?
Do you know what I mean? I mean
does it-
Cortés.
What is
My 10 is Cortés versus the Aztecs.
okay? So these are 2 completely different civilizations,
Yes.
right? And the Persians and the Greeks, we would say, are completely different, right?
Not on the scale of Aztec
not
versus
exactly,
Cortés,
yeah,
but
but
yes,
we
pretty
can
high.
say we can say that that's a. So what you mean by Crusades is that these are two very different civilizations that are clashing into each other, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying.
Yes.
Okay, I would say I think it's less than 5, man. I would give it
Less than 5.
because for a couple of reasons. One, dude, I'm telling you, yeah, and part of the reason why people mess this up in their head is
Mhm.
because of the legacy of the Crusades. Islam and Christianity are not that different. Like, I understand the difference between theory and practice. Okay, Indians and Pakistanis, with all due respect, you're not that different. But in practice, you fought
There we go.
wars. No, listen. But in practice, you fought wars, and you're very antagonistic to each other. Your birth myth, whatever the origin story
Yeah.
of both of your countries is in some ways created in antagonism to the other, right? So in practice, you're very different, right? So I understand there's a difference between them, but dude, Islam and Christianity are nowhere near as different.
But that's
as
only one aspect. You're only looking at Islam,
That's only
Christianity.
one
What about
aspect.
the
Very nice,
languages,
very nice. But there's
military?
other aspects too,
Mhm.
like the level of exposure that those 2 civilizations had to each other. It's not as little. I'm not trying to make it out as if it
Yeah.
was 21st century cosmopolitanism, but it was not as little as people make it out to be. And then lastly, I think the most powerful source of my argument is that once the Crusaders went into the Levant, it was not this atmosphere of you see a Saracen, you behead him. There was a lot of nuance in terms of the
Yeah.
way they dealt with other Muslim states. There was agreements made. There was peace treaties. There was alliances. There was alliances with other Muslim states against other Crusader
But that
states.
happened with Greeks and Persians, and that happened with Cortés and the Mesoamerican people too.
Yeah.
So
but
why are you jumping from 4 to 8 in those cases?
You can I think you can say that Cortez and the Aztecs had nothing in common. The 2 civilizations had broken apart like 10,000 years ago, I think. But well, and in terms of Greeks and Persians, they had very different government styles. They were very different. You know, you have city-states versus a centralized empire. You have a state that has slavery and a state that does not have slavery, and they were very different. But
Yeah.
I agree with Tariq that Muslims and the Christians were not that different, at least in terms of religion. They were not in practice very different. Theory is all that, but yes, they could find room for each other. But they had learned from each other so much. So much of Muslims had learned so much from the Levant, the Christian Levant, the same thing that the Western Europeans had learned from. They had interactions through Andalus. Andalus was in contact with the Eastern Islamic world, so it's not that much of a. In terms of to quantify it, I think I would quantify Greece and Persia at 6, and the Crusades at like 3.
Wow.
yeah, I mean, I'm not even mad.
British Zulu,
Sorry.
Britain versus Zulu. Where do you put that?
8.
Yeah, higher.
Something like 8.
Because, dude, one thing you got to take into consideration, and I like to see, I wish touched upon this, is in that time period, if we're talking about the Levant, I spoke in my master's, I did a module on this, and Konrad Hirschler, I think he teaches in Germany now, the Open University or something. He literally told me that demographically, the shift, the Muslim majority in Syria, he doesn't mean modern day Syria, he meant Bilad al-Sham, Great Syria, Lebanon, Palestine as well, shifted in the 12th century, where up before that, there was more Christians in the area than there were Muslims.
True.
And that is a really, really important fact to take into consideration, because the Crusades happened over a period of what, 170? Well, no, actually, no, almost 200 years, 190 something years. And if there was that level of hostility, which naturally will come with a clash of a civilization, why didn't Muslim rulers just target Christian Middle Easterners? There was very little evidence of that. It's because they
after
didn't.
The Crusades started, they did a bit. After the Crusades started, they did. There are instances of that.
There's like tiny little, like which instance? I can't even think of one.
Antioch, like they expelled the population of most of the Christians.
Okay.
Yeah. Was that around 1200 something?
No, I think that was
after the First
Crusade. Yeah,
during the First Crusade. But I think we kind of align. My numbers were probably, I'm gonna put the Greco-Persian as like 6.5 and Crusades at a 5. That's my ranking.
Okay.
And it's exactly, it's a clash of civilizations, but it's overblown. It's not an 8, it's not a 7. That's delusional. But this is making me think of a different question.
No.
Al-Andalus, a ton of interaction between the Christian and Islamic world, a ton. Why didn't the Levant and the Crusader interaction not come nearly as close as much as Al-Andalus? What happened there?
That's a very good question.
Think about it. Like I haven't really thought about it. Not a lot of interaction there. Not a lot of exchange from knowledge for either party.
I would say trade, because they were not trading directly. The Andalus and Eastern Muslims were trading directly.
No. I think he's saying the Muslims and the Christians in the Levant, Siawish, why didn't they interact in the same way that the
Muslims and the Christians in the Levant?
Yeah. Not a lot of exchange of ideas. Not a lot of.
There
nothing
was
like
quite a lot of exchange of ideas, like with the golden.
Not on the same level, though, dude.
Yeah, not on the same level. True.
Not even close.
I think that might be because the center of Muslim power or Muslim everything was Iraq, and
there wasn't even a center.
Yeah, like Damascus after the fall of the Umayyads was not Syria and Damascus neither of them were as important as Baghdad was.
I'm sorry, but Iraq is pretty close, and there are multiple Atabegs that go from Mosul to fight the Crusaders.
Yeah. Also, I would say your point is definitely valid about post Umayyads. Damascus kind of falls into whatever, kind of declines a bit. But again, let's not overblow that, because you got Damascus, you got Aleppo. Those are two. Damascus maybe not so much, but Aleppo retains its importance.
Huge importance.
Until like the early Ottoman period.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
It's a very good question, actually. I'm glad you said it. I never thought about it.
Yeah, me too, honestly. Like I maybe crossed my mind a little bit, and I'm hoping someone in the comments can prove me right or wrong, because we can't understate how much interaction now.
You know what I think it is?
It's huge.
I'm gonna trigger some of your listeners.
All right.
It's because Muslims do it better, bro. I'm telling
you.
I just thought about it myself, right? The interaction you see in Iberia, by the way, spoiler alert, it's not on the Reconquista side. Like the tolerance that people romanticize now, to be fair, about medieval Iberia didn't really take place on the Christian side of things. They weren't like, that's not what people are referring to when they talk about medieval Iberian tolerance. They're referring to the Muslim states and how they were tolerant to the Jews and the Christians, right?
I know, but like, come on, they took ideas from ancient Greece, classical ideas there. Like, it's unfair to say it was only on the Islamic side. There were two sides of that exchange.
Yeah, dude. No, don't listen. One thing I don't like when people do, and maybe this is because I am a bit too harsh, is I don't like when people just obscure facts just so they can make them feel better. No, just actually break it down.
Okay.
I understand that saying there's two sides to a story, and I don't want to be unfairly harsh to somebody, but just think about it. How much that tolerance, how much of that romanticization?
No one's talking about tolerance here.
No, but just you know what I'm talking about with that paradise of tolerance myth about Iberia, medieval Iberia.
Yeah.
They're not talking about the Christian states. They're talking about the Muslim. They're talking about Al-Andalus.
What are we talking about?
Because at that period of time, Al-Andalus was the dominant thing.
Yeah, but dude, in the 11th century, it's like maybe you can argue 2/3 or like 60% of the country is run by the Muslims.
That's a lot. Of course, people are going to talk about the dominant force. The same way, listen, you're unfair because the same way people talk about.
Why is 100%? Why is 100% of this diffusion of power and this great, center of tolerance happening? Why is 100% of it in the Muslim side if they only run 100%?
Well, because first. There's
this is
as you say
Georgi, yes.
No wait, hold on. No, I completely disagree because there was not a lot of tolerance. What are you saying? There was 50 good years in Cordoba and that's it. That's all your tolerance in Al-Andalus.
Not 50, 50
it's like
100, fine.
By the way, it was way more than 50 or 100. The problem is when tolerance, they're looking at it from a modern perspective. Medieval relative tolerance, dude.
Wait, again, why are we talking tolerance? My point was exchange of ideas. Socrates, Aristotle.
Tolerance isn't even that important. It's overrated. Exchange of ideas. Okay, this is very important. Transmission of intellectual ideas.
Yes.
Right. That happened in terms of a Christian state in Iberia when a Christian state took over a vital Muslim city. Toledo was essential. You have the Toledo School of Translation, where Alfonso the Wise, he sets up this commission and he starts recruiting these Arabs and these Muslims that lived in the city and gets them to translate these works, which makes their way above the Pyrenees into Western Europe and whatnot. But in terms of it happening organically, it doesn't happen in Christian Iberia. It doesn't. It happens in Muslim Iberia.
I don't know enough about this topic to give you pushback.
Christians are too militant. They're too extremist, dude. Bro, this is the funny thing with the modern period is Muslims are seen as jihadists, blowing themselves up. Dude, historically, that's the Christians, man. Leave me alone. Muslims are here just chilling.
So I think you're going way too hard on one side.
By the way, I'm 60% trolling people. Don't think.
Yeah. But do you know about Frederick II?
Yeah, the one that drowned on the way to the Third Crusade.
No, that's the first. That's Frederick Barbarossa.
Oh, the second one is the fourth, fifth, sixth Crusade. He recaptured Jerusalem.
He recaptured Jerusalem with negotiation, and he actually employed a lot of Saracens in his army. Yeah. And he was extremely a huge patron of the arts and sciences, and he took a lot of ideas and brought them in Sicily, Islamic ideas, brought them to Sicily and Naples, and a lot of people hated him for it. But I mean, you can point to some examples. I can point to some examples.
The Normans are exceptional. This is why I find the Normans so fascinating, dude. Yeah. The Normans' ability to adapt, whether it is Sicily, whether it's in England, whether it's Normandy. Sorry?
Anatolia.
It's so fascinating to me.
Really fascinating.
But most of Western Christian, you lot are just closed-minded.
No. I'm not Western Christian. Come on, don't throw me there.
Catholics. I think you should say Catholics because Catholics. I went to the south of Germany the other day, and here I sometimes forget that Germany is a Christian, technically a Christian state, but there it's constantly the churches or bells are ringing. You go to churches and people are there. So I think Catholics are a little too Christian. But no, I would totally not agree.
Catholics are a little too Christian, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, the same way that you can say the Wahhabis are the two Muslims. So I think that not exactly. I mean, the Wahhabis are fundamentalist and
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah.
All right, all right. Well, there's one more topic I wanted to pick up from the debate episode, and that is the Mongols. So let me break it down. You were talking about this battle, which is incredibly overblown with the Mamelukes, who are really like the Mamelukes at their best beat the Mongols at their worst. Can we agree on that?
That's not a bad way of looking at it.
Right?
Not
I wouldn't say
not
their
their
worst.
worst. Yeah.
Nah, not their worst.
What's their worst?
After Hulagu Khan is dead.
After what?
Like their worst would be not even after Hulagu Khan is dead. I mean, the Ilkhanate was quite strong.
Yeah.
Do you
No,
want a
dude,
hot
their
take?
worst is way
Kind
after
Do you want
Mamelukes.
do you want a really spicy hot take?
Go on.
Yeah,
I do not consider
the Ilkhanate to be a Muslim empire.
I do not consider anything. I consider the Kublai Khan's ascension to the Yuan dynasty the death of the Mongol Empire, and everything after him they should not be called Mongols in the same breath as the Mongols of Legnica and Kalka River and the others.
Really?
But then, wouldn't you say that Hulagu Khan himself, like he was the Il Khan, he considered himself the
Wait,
subservient Khan?
I'm sorry. With that pronunciation, never heard it. Which are you talking about? Kublai Khan?
No,
Hulagu Khan.
Hulagu.
Hulagu. Sorry,
Hulagu. Oh,
sorry.
Wait, in order we
What
call
about
him
him?
Hulagu Khan.
I do not. Oh, he's tricky because.
And what about like Berke Khan and Batu Khan?
Yeah.
Batu's Mongol.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I'll give you that
Hulagu,
one. What about Berke Khan?
Mongol.
What
But, like-
about what about Uzbek Khan in the 14th century?
Uzbek
Listen-
Khan came later. I don't consider
No.
him Mongol myself.
No.
Really? He's Golden Horde though, 1311.
Golden Horde's not Mongol.
Golden Horde's not
Okay, that sounds a little bit arbitrary in my opinion.
Yeah,
Here's
man.
my point. Kublai Khan and his brothers are raised by Surkutani Beki in a extremely different way. Each of them. It's not chance that each of them like picks up a different religion and everything. She wanted to make them adapt and assimilate to the cultures that they were sent in. Overall, it was a very Chinese, Confucius type of education, especially with Kublai Khan. But she set the foundation, this woman, and we don't speak about women enough. She set the foundation for them being vastly different than their father. So it's ingrained. It's like, imagine if you are raised by a fanatically, but your mother is obsessed with a culture that's different than your own or your father's, and you're raised in an environment that is completely different than your blood or your father's. I mean, it's worse than a first generation immigrant, I think. Not worse, but like a stronger impact. But
dude,
that's culturally. Militarily wise, they also, the military of those states is vastly different to the Mongol military as well.
but that's quite a stagnant way of thinking, if you don't mind me saying. I don't mean to say.
I'm sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, just like, if I was a Mongol and I heard somebody say that what you just said, I'd feel a bit disrespected. Like, dude,
maybe
you don't think I can adapt? I can modify? Because Kublai didn't just do it for banter's sake. He did it. He was in a new environment where he had to adapt.
Well, okay, fair enough. But like the Mongol state, it ended with the fragmentation of the empire, right? You don't consider the Yuan dynasty the Mongol Empire, right?
No, not really.
Yeah.
So why do you consider Kublai Khan a Mongol? Why is he not Yuanese?
Well, Kublai Khan is Mongol. His children were not Mongol.
All right, I'm good with that. That I can live with.
Yeah, the transition happened within his life.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know?
Considering the fact that he lived until he was 70 something, that makes sense. The guy was born, like, dude, he was 12 years old. He was going through puberty when Genghis Khan was alive.
Really?
Wasn't he born in 1215, Siawish? Or is that wrong?
1215, I'm not sure. I don't think
I'll look it up. You guys keep going. Wow.
That sounds a little early, but let me double check.
Yeah, it sounds a little early.
Yeah, born in 1215.
Yeah, there you go.
How
wow.
When was Tolui born?
Oh, like 1180s or something. I think
Ah,
Genghis started pumping them out when he was like 16.
yeah, that's true. That's true, because like uh um, Jochi was born when he was 17.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
1191.
It's like
To
Crusader
Louis,
Kings.
1191. Wow. Wow.
That's good. When you're like in Crusader Kings, when you turn like, I don't know, 32, you have a son who's 16 and all that. That's good.
Okay, okay.
That's a
But
vibe.
let's get back on track. So like you don't consider the Mongols at their worst in fighting the Mamelukes.
Not necessarily. I mean, it's
No.
towards the, they're not at their best, of
Okay.
course. It's close to their worst, I guess you could say, but
All right.
They were on their way out.
Okay.
Obviously they had other priorities. If they had sent their full force, like for example Batu Khan did
Yes.
with Ukraine, or
Subutai.
even what they did with Baghdad, if they had sent their full force, maybe, but in the open field, in like in the Middle East, that would have been different. I don't think they would have been able to take Egypt though.
Interesting.
I really don't think that.
I don't think Egypt is that hard to take, man. I'll be honest with you. And I think if you listen. If you look at
I'll open up a map of it, geographic map of Egypt.
If you look at Egypt in the 10th century, 11th century, no, not 11th, but if you look at it in the 10th and the 9th century, and you see how many times it changed hands.
Yeah, that's a great point.
The Irshidids, there was one beginning with like T, I think, Tulunids. Oh yeah, Ahmad ibn Tulun. The Tulunids, and then subsequently the Fatimids. And then even when the Fatimids first came into power, 969, I think they established Cairo, the city as well, under the general Jahir, who apparently was either Sicilian or Slavic or something, or Greek. You have that. Have you heard of that group? Siawish, they were like followers of Ikhwan? No. It's like in the 10th century, they even established a state in like Bahrain, but they used to Karmatians, thank you. They were even worried about a Karmatian force coming and kicking them out within like 3 years of them establishing themselves in Cairo. So, and the amount of times that you see Fatimid governors in the latter half.
Yeah, I think you made your point, and looking at the map, like it's not impossible. The Mongols been through worse.
I'm not saying that they wouldn't have been able to take Egypt because of its unique geography. I'm saying that if you were established in Baghdad or Damascus and then let's say take some years to prepare, that would have been a different thing. But here we have an army.
But the Mongols were not established in the Khwarezmian Empire when they hit Russia and Europe. They still came from Karakorum.
That's two different. That's two completely.
How is it different?
See, with Russia, you already had the Golden Horde established.
No.
Before
that.
Are you talking about when Genghis Khan attacked the Volga Bulgars?
Yeah, and then like a decade after, like 1230s, 1240, like under Subutai and Batu.
Russia is part of the steppe. Like the steppe extends that way. You go that way. But here you would have to cross 2 deserts.
You'd have to go
they already got Baghdad. They already got Baghdad.
Well, with Baghdad,
they would have resistance around
it. They would have to establish themselves in Baghdad or Damascus before they take Egypt. In 1258, they take Baghdad, and in 1260, they move on Egypt. Well, they don't actually move on Egypt, but they lose Ain Jalut. Within 2 years, at that time, there's no way that they could have taken it. Maybe if they had waited a few years, established themselves, or something like that, then they would have taken it. But at that time,
I think you don't need to go that far. I think all you need to change is not for them, because at the time what would become the Ilkhanate was preparing and was about to wage war with the Golden Horde.
Right.
Many people don't know that. Many people don't know that the two states were about to clash as Ain Jalut happened. I'm asking you this. Imagine they hug it out. And they go, it's all good, bro. I'm gonna be dealing with my stuff in the Golden Horde. You can deal with your stuff over there. And then Hulagu puts his full attention, not even whole empire, just the full attention of the Ilkhanate is looking straight down the Mamelukes.
You're
What
forgetting
happens?
about one important factor,
Okay.
Georgie, is in that time they were also doing the election for the Great
Yeah,
Khan,
Kurultai.
and
Yeah.
Hulagu was actually preparing to
Yeah.
leave to
Yeah.
Karakoram.
Ignore that as well.
That's
Yeah.
where he was.
Oh,
That's where
everyone
he was
just.
when Ain Jalut happened.
Yes.
He wasn't
Imagine.
there.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Imagine all of these brothers hug it
Oh,
out.
okay. No way, man. I would put my money on.
Here's what I would say. The thing is,
Yes.
Egypt was strong at the time.
Yes.
It had a good population, whereas the entire region that the Ilkhanate controlled was largely depopulated because of the
Khwarezmi
various
also had a
sects.
decent population,
Yeah,
And
they had they had failed, but I think that
but they were weak.
for the Ilkhanate to establish itself, it would need a large army to actually be able to take
Mm.
Egypt. So
I
I think that
disagree with Siawish.
the Ilkhanate would have had to take some time in order to develop an army
Okay,
again to sort of
I
build the
agree with that
infrastructure.
part, but I disagree when Siawish said that Egypt was strong, because you have to bear in mind that the Mamluks literally came into power, like, it depends which date you use officially, but like 10 years before. And
Yeah,
their
With a
introduction
violent takeover.
with a
with a
violent
violent
takeover.
takeover, but a violent takeover which had not destabilized Egypt. It had only destabilized the Ayyubids. It had not destabilized the
Okay,
country itself.
okay, but think about the nature of the Mamluks, Siawish. Eventually, it descended into some sort of a hereditary line, which intermittently, but it as with many Turkic dynasties, it lends itself into court intrigues,
Hmm.
and that's exactly what happened. Like literally after the Battle of Angelut, Baybars, well, technically he was like the leading commander on the battlefield, but he was not the Sultan at that time. It was his friend Kutuz. After the battle, he decides to assassinate his friend. And you
Yeah,
see that level of
that's
court
not very
intrigue.
stable.
Yeah, it doesn't breed stability.
And imagine
So,
if Angelut went the other way. Forget
yeah,
Egypt. Imagine just Angelut went the other way. Imagine how much, because the Mamluks are based on military prowess. That's how they got on top. If
yeah.
that is questioned, even by a slight defeat, let's not even give the Mongols a decisive victory. Let's give them a small victory where the Mamluks lose a good portion of their army, or even their commander gets assassinated. That's going to make them spiral and make Egypt very destabilized, fracture into like this city, this city, this city with local governors. And all the Mongols have to do is just walk in with 5,000 Mongols
Yeah,
and turn them on each other and kill a couple of cities and tell the rest to surrender and they'll be fine.
dude, with their
That's
reputation,
true.
of course.
That's true. Like at the time, the fracturing of the Mamluks would have destabilized Egypt, but in
Very
1260 it was not unstable. It was ripe for instability, like everything. I
well
agree with
said.
all of that, but it wasn't actually unstable at the time. Like the Ayyubids,
Yeah.
the transition of power from the Ayyubids to the Mamluks was relatively smooth.
And I'm sure Angelut did a lot to stabilize them in the end, even though there
Yeah.
was more violence. But let me ask you this specifically, Siawish. How do you see things unfolding if the Mongols did take them down? What's the
Egypt,
long-term effects? Because they will implode regardless, right? They can take down Egypt, but they're not keeping Egypt.
yeah, Egypt would have overstretched them.
Yes. I mean,
Yeah,
they were already overstaged, but what's the fate of Egypt in that scenario?
um, it would have been quite serious, I think, because it depends on like if the Mamluks. I think the Mamluks would have put up quite a bit of resistance because they were proud of their own prowess as well. So I think that maybe Egypt would have been depopulated quite a lot by the Mongols. I think
Sadly, yeah.
that would have been the case. And if like in the coming centuries after the Mongols, we see Egypt prosper, Egypt to be the only prosperous state when, for example, the Black Death hits 100 years later.
Oof.
So there would have been, so it would not have been prosperous depending on how much depopulation would have
Yeah.
happened. It mm, it would have been quite interesting. I think that maybe it would have stayed unstable till the Ottomans came along. I think
Wow.
maybe for the next 300 years, I don't think they would have been stabilized by anybody because there was no state to its east or its west that was powerful enough to take it and stabilize it.
Interesting. I love these little alternative history exercises that the point to me at least is not just to speculate what's going to happen, it's to learn more. Like even now I learned more about this region by discussing this idea, and this is, I think, what a lot of people when they're doing the alternative history, like they go too deep in the rabbit hole. Like the man in the high castle maybe can teach you something about stuff, but mostly it's just a complete fantasy where you're just purely speculating. But with this, I did find it very interesting, and I did find all this both of these episodes extremely interesting. But we're on the clock, so boys, what do you want us to wrap this up with? I think we still have about 10-15 minutes, so I'm give it up to you.
I don't know, man. You mean like a different topic of discussion?
Whatever you want, yeah.
Can't think of anything right now. What do you think, Siawish?
Nothing. Well, nothing actually.
Siawish is all talked out. This is the most talking he's done like in the last week.
I'm usually all talked out. I don't know. I don't talk that much in general.
Yeah.
Well, regardless, it was a really good talk, and you did bring a lot of fire. So did you, Tarek. And I really, really, really want to thank both of you for being on, and genuinely hope we do this again.
Yep.
Awesome. For the record, I brought more fire, but
Of course.
Vote in the comments and tell us who won, and we'll be looking at them later.
Guys, I'll be disappointed if you don't say me. If you don't say me.
All right. Check both of their channels out, and subscribe to our channel and our Patreon, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.
Nice. Okay.
Ow. Okay, I have to go get breakfast because I'm really hungry.
Recording.
Me
What
too.
time is it? 3:08.